This is Creative Banter. Though it didn't seem to go all that well, I finally had a job interview the other day. The last position I interviewed for was back in October for an outdoor retail company. And previous to that was an interview in July for a teaching position. So maybe I was just a bit rusty. Or maybe they knew immediately that I wasn't the right fit. Either way, after a bit of ranting off the air, Ben and I discuss what this means and what my plans are moving forward. Let's dive right into this, shall we? The last time that I was interviewed for a teaching position was, I think, in July.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking, 8 months that I haven't had any kind of interaction like that before to really rehearse my questions and get that experience and everything. And on top of that, the type of questions that they always ask are always worded so oddly, like they're almost trick questions, or like there are a multitude of ways to answer it, but they only want one answer. I'm like, why can't you, if you want to talk about skills and technology in the classroom, just say, all right, tell me about skills and technology in the classroom. Like, don't word it in some like hieroglyphic weird ass way. But
yeah, the whole process seems so like performative in terms of
exactly.
This is what we want, but we're not going to tell you what we want, but we hope that you will dance for us. It's a whole weird thing. And
what's really sad about it too is, and I don't know if this is to blame, I'm sure part of it is to blame on me, but also part is to blame on the school that I went to and that kind of thing as well. But you go for these interviews, and I have my master's in education. You would think that I could just knock off these questions real quick, even just like textbook basic answers. But like, did I not pay attention enough in school because I can't do that? Like, I just feel like there's some kind of like gap that I have that I just can't answer those questions how they want me to. And I don't know if that's a lack of, I'm sure it is a lack of experience in some aspects, but also a lack of education, or like I said, did I just not pay attention enough? But my grades don't reflect me not paying attention enough. So it's like, I look back at the interview that I had in October, and that was for LL Bean, just an outdoor outfitters around us. And I mean, they wanted to give me the job. I would have had that job if it wasn't for the fact that the hours were so messed up, so minimal, and the pay just wasn't there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like, I think about it and I would enjoy teaching. I think about teaching and I think about the enjoyment that I had when I was student teaching and the times that I've been subbing and all of that. And I think, I'd really like to be in a classroom environment like this. But at the same time, I think back to that interview at LL Bean and I could knock out all those questions out of the park. And that was my realm, being like outdoor nature side of things.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things, like, in the meantime, before any sort of full-time photography income sort of comes my way, writing and whatever you want to consider it, before I go full-time officially and make enough through these means to support myself and not have to worry about another job or insurance or any of that stuff, like, I just question, what is the right path for me?
Yeah.
Like, do I just say, screw it, screw the 5 years or 6 years, whatever it is, of work that I put into getting my degrees, and just take a job for $16-18, whatever it is, at like LL Bean, at REI, at wherever, and just run with that, because that's more of my forte, that's more of my knowledge base, even though it's a retail position.
Yeah.
Or do I keep trying for these slightly better paying teaching positions, because that's where my degree is at, and at the same time, I still love English and I love teaching. So there's just that split, and it's very weird for me to try and figure that out.
Yeah. Now, do you think some of that is based on the location of where you are? Like, or there's perhaps other locations where you would perhaps be able to, secure that teaching job or something, or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know exactly. I mean, I still think that it's one of the big things holding me back in a sense. And I'm very grateful for the experience that I had with student teaching, but my experience there was unlike any other experience that you would have had.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when we were talking about that and the sort of the way that the classroom was handled and the way that the students are and everything. And it was definitely a very unique experience as you described it.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about serial killers. We were talking about...
Hopefully that didn't come up in the conversations with the latest job interview.
It was like the Columbine mass shooting and that just all these different topics that were so much more interesting that the students grasped onto because, I mean, they are kids who find that kind of stuff interesting. Yeah. Like, what kid doesn't find the Ted Bundy documentaries and such to be interesting to watch, like, given their popularity? So as great of an experience as it was to see English done in a very different way, I think it also hurt me because it was so untraditional. I mean, even going back to the fact that 2 days out of the week were, for those entire classroom periods, you were just sitting there reading. You were having the kids read, and that's amazing and that's great. But to go to some of these other schools that, like the school that I student taught at was more of it was a lower end school, in a way. It was more of the like poorer kids, poor neighborhood kind of deal. Yeah. So you would think that those would be the schools that would be more rigid on like the curriculum and following the book and reading Shakespeare and all of the classics and stuff. But it's the opposite. You go to the richer schools and those are the schools that are following the book exactly to the curriculum. Yeah. And there's no flexibility for creativity. And
that was that the kind of school that you were interviewing at for this one?
Yeah, okay. It was essentially the rival school of the high school I went to. But okay. So similar, it was going to be the similar curriculum to what I had received when I was going through school there. But I don't know. It would be like I could see teaching at a school like where I student taught at, and being able to have that flexibility of curriculum and everything. But at the same time, then you go into a school where there's a lot of violence, where the first week that I was student teaching there, we had a lockdown drill because a kid brought a gun to school.
Oh, geez.
Like, that's the kind of environment that you get into. But at least you have flexibility as a teacher.
It's pros and cons.
Yeah. You're risking your life even more than you usually are as a teacher in America. Yeah. But you can teach about serial killers. You can teach about school shootings while one's happening. Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea what to do. Like, I was talking to Dan a bit earlier today and texting back and forth. And I was pretty much just saying to him, like, when it comes to my photography and my writing and all of that, I want to follow this slow growth, slow productivity, very sustainable kind of thing. Yeah, for sure. Like the fact that in 2 years maintained as editor for Nature Vision magazine, I could easily see that becoming profitable enough on my end to do that as like a full-time gig, so to speak, where I don't have to worry so much about having another job or other income coming in. But it's a matter of what do I do in the meantime? Yeah. And not to mention, one of the biggest things that's been getting to me lately is just the loneliness is absolutely killing me. Like I don't think I'm quite as introverted as what you are in terms of I don't want to be around people like ever. Yeah. But at the same time, like, yes, I am very introverted. I'm just fine on my own. But when you are going months just sitting at the house, staring at a computer screen or whatever, especially with seasonal affective disorder kicking your ass, along with depression and anxiety hitting you from behind as well. It's one of those things, like, maybe it's the routine that I'm missing out on. Maybe it's just the slight human interaction where I could, maybe just a basic part-time job somewhere would get me enough out of some sort of rut that I'm in terms of feeling so isolated.
Yeah.
But it's,
I think there's something to be said about that, or whether it's, volunteering somewhere or something like that in order to have, to get that dose of human interaction, and have that sense of schedule. Though I will say that, where you are right now, I think with the connections that you have, with the ambition that you have, I would say that you're beyond where I was when I was your age. Because I would have been at your age, I would have been working retail at the camera store, but I wasn't really that much into photography yet. I didn't really know anything about that road that I would end up going down. Mm-hmm. And so I think because you've been doing a really good job at building up those connections, having those conversations with people via text or whatever, podcasts, stuff like that. So I think you are building that foundation for whatever is to come, even though it doesn't really seem like you're building it right now. I do think you're working those connections, and it's just a matter of at some point there'll be that spark of things that really get things going. But I could definitely see how it would be beneficial, like you said, to have, a part-time job somewhere to give that, kind of like when I go on my trips, getting that first photo out of the way kind of gets that cycle going. And I think that is something that leads to being more productive with one's time and breaking up the monotony and everything else along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's the other thing too with it that I really question is this really just in my head, in a sense? Like, obviously, of course it is, but but you say about like routine and all of that, and like I go to the gym 3 days a week, so I'm still around people. But I'm isolated in my own world around people.
Yeah. Well, they're just objects there. They're not. You're not interacting with them.
But I also wonder, like, would a simple walk in the woods, maybe every morning or so, something basic, or just walking in general, be enough to sort of, at least, it's not going to fix the isolation aspect, the missing out on deeper interactions, in-person interactions with people, but would it be enough to sort of get myself out of my head more and that kind of deal? There's a lot of questions around that, and like the slow mornings kind of routine of trying to get away from my phone entirely for the mornings and doing more meaningful things, whether it's going to the gym and reading and journaling or something along those lines, kind of staying away from technology. But it's, I don't know, it's just a matter of continuing to find what works best for me and what I would need in the meantime between whether I start making more money off photography in some manner or whether I get a part-time or full-time job somewhere else doing whatever it is. But just trying to work that out, because I know that if, say, by September of this year or so, I still haven't gotten any teaching jobs, still haven't been successful in finding any other job, and am, in a sense, forced for another year to be a quote-unquote full-time photographer making pennies on the dollar. It's as right, one does. Exactly. Something needs to shift from how it's been since I graduated, in terms of how I go about each of my days, because especially for during the winter, it gets rough. So yeah. I mean, that's definitely got to be a huge factor. And it's a at least I find that for myself, I need to have certain things that are things to look forward to that are a little ways out, maybe not too far
of the way out, but like little trips to places or whatever, in terms of, have that thing to look forward to, that thing to have on your mind. I also know that, in the past year or so, you had like a lot of like the, camping trips that didn't work out for one reason or another, stuff like that, where, you had those things to look forward to, but then, boom, taken away.
Exactly.
So that's might be another contributing factor as well. Because like my wife and I are thinking like, oh, we need to do a trip at some point coming up. And once we get that plan, that will be something where it's, something to look forward to, something to change up the monotony. There's a word there. Don't ask me to spell it, but it's a word. But yeah, to kind of break things up a little bit and to give that little dangling carrot off in the distance. But I don't know, man. That is definitely a tricky one. And are there jobs that you could go get that just don't necessarily pay very well, but you're pretty sure you could get hired on for them?
Probably. At least if I take my resume, strip my college experience off from it, at least the master's aspect of it, and just apply with that. Apply with a very basic, like pretend that I don't have the degrees that I have, and then go from there.
That's very true.
That's essentially what I'm going to have to do. Is just make a generic resume with some retail experience that I've had in the past on it, and just see what sticks, see if anything lands. Which I still think is odd, the fact that I have to do that, but didn't for LL Bean back in October, that they were just would have been willing to hire me. Maybe because it was a seasonal position, but still they were going to be bringing some of those people on a permanent basis after February or whatever it was. But yeah, I don't know. I could absolutely get some kind of job. That's, I don't know, McDonald's or whatever. It's just I don't want to. Like, I don't want to be. I don't want to do that if I don't absolutely have to. Like, I feel like my time, my knowledge, whatever, is worth more than the stereotypical flipping burgers. But maybe at this point it just isn't, in terms of at least me getting a job for some padding on the resume, so I don't have a year-long blank period.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, but it's hopefully there's an answer in there somewhere. But I did see that in the past week. I saw you had posted on Instagram that you're out working with the new camera, and saw that you were taking a photo of some ice, and I think there's some leaves, and that was a pretty nice looking composition. So how did that go about? What was your experience working with the new camera?
It's been a dream.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
It has absolutely been worlds beyond better than the Sony or the Nikon before it. I actually just got this week, maybe 2 days ago, yesterday, whatever it was. Yesterday. Yeah, last night. I got the Pentax 120mm f4 macro lens. It was made for the Pentax 645 system of cameras. It's technically an autofocus lens. I think it's the newest version of the lens. Obviously, because I just have a dummy adapter on it, I can't use the camera to set aperture. It's just by the aperture ring, and I can't autofocus with it. But
it's going to slow you down, kind of like a large format camera at that point,
Yeah, exactly.
Probably focus it wide open, then stop it down, and do that whole process.
Yeah, but that is a lens that is going to be very fun to use because it's 1-to-1 reproduction. It's roughly a 95mm equivalent.
Okay, so pretty much a standard macro-ish sort of length on a 35.
And on top of that, it is sharp as a tack. So it's great. It was one of those deals. I was going back and forth on what lens to figure out, as I've talked about before, which lens to get. And I was between the 100 to 200 from Fuji, which is what Andrew Baruffi uses, and he also uses the teleconverter and the 18 millimeter extension tube.
Mm-hmm.
But he sent me a video, behind the scenes video at one point, and the close focusing distance just wasn't, to me, it wasn't there for what I want.
Yeah.
You still had to be quite a bit far away from the subject. And so, not to mention, you're spending, so the lens is about $1,300 used. On top of that, you have the teleconverter, which is about $800. And then you have the 18 millimeter extension tube, which is about $400. So you're looking at a roughly $3,000 setup, a little under $3,000 setup.
Wow.
For a 79 millimeter equivalent lens that can maybe get 1 to 2 reproduction.
Yeah.
Versus I paid $155 for the adapter and $350 for the Pentax 120.
Nice.
So $600 for that, and I get 1-to-1. So I'm happy with it. I'm at least in concept. I will be playing around with it this weekend and seeing how it goes. But I figure with most of my lenses, they're going to be adapted lenses, at least from Pentax, especially now that I have this adapter. I can get a 600 millimeter lens for under or right around $2,000 from Pentax.
Oh.
Versus spending whatever the 500 millimeter from Fuji is going to cost.
Yeah.
If I want that anyway, but still, I have a lot of options. That's pretty nice, and they're all sharp. So
yeah. Well, that's good. That's good that the experience of working with the camera was that went well. I haven't, other than seeing it in the story, I haven't seen if you've posted anything elsewhere from that. But it was
I haven't even touched the files yet.
Okay, because it was a really cool looking scene. So I can definitely see how that will make for a pretty fun image.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the files are sharp, at least acceptably so, because the problem that I was running into and why I ultimately got this Pentax was the Midicon's focusing range isn't the best in terms of close focusing.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to get the composition that I wanted and finagle the tripod so that everything was sharp without really messing up the composition, it took a while.
Yeah.
So I'm just hoping that I was right at that appropriate focusing for that shot, but we'll see in a few months when I get around to it. I have a year's worth of editing that I have to do. I'm still working on Acadia photos. So.
Well, speaking of working on photos, so when we recorded last week, I had just picked up my film and I had mentioned how I was quite happy with what I got from that trip. And so in the past week or so, I still have all those photos open in Photoshop, and I revisit the files. I have them laid out side by side in two separate kind of a split screen mode. And that way I can, look at one image compared to another one and just use that to keep grounded with the edits. And of the, I believe, 9 subjects I photographed on that trip, I have 5 very high grade portfolio shots, which is
nice.
Pretty awesome. And so usually, what I'm really looking for by the end of the year is 10 photos I'm very happy with for the print portfolios. And then obviously anything more than that is great for the zine. It's great for the other stuff. It gives me more stuff to work with. But now having 5 images from that trip has me feeling pretty good about that. And some of them are scenes I've wanted to get photos of for a while. I just happen to have some good conditions. But I was also, we're recording this on February 29th, which is, it just sounds weird to say that. And so it's basically, it should be March already. We'll do it that way. And there's another storm that is rolling in through California. It's going to hit mostly Northern California and go across kind of the northern US. And it's more of a cold winter storm than the ones we've had in the past. And I saw, about a week and a half ago that this was in the forecast. I'm like, all right, I got to go to Zion, have one last chance of getting some degree of winter weather there, because it's been a relatively warm winter. and they've had more rain than they've had snow. So I've got my truck packed to head to Zion tomorrow, and this is going to be a pretty windy storm. They're saying 40, 50 mile an hour winds through Zion. When that storm goes through the Death Valley area, they're saying up to like 60 mile an hour winds.
Jeez.
So a lot of wind, not as much rain as the past ones, but it looks like the forecast is showing that in the higher elevation portions of Zion, where I like to go, they should get some snow up there, and at least some sub-freezing overnight temperatures from the rain and snow and all that sort of stuff from the past few days would give me some nice ice to work with, perhaps in the washes. But it'll be interesting. And going into this trip, really with no real expectations in terms of there's not like, oh, I need to get X number of photos to fit whatever quota. I think it's going to be more a matter of get there, enjoy some stormy weather, watching the place come alive, the sights, the smells. If I get some snow to work with and some cool scenes present themselves, that would be great. But not really feeling like I need anything from the trip. So really going into it with very little in the way of expectations.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be interesting. Though I will say, as before we started recording, I was just saying how, man, I feel really drained today. And so I'm just really low energy today. And then also thinking about like, oh man, I'm going to be very active in the next few days. So I'm trying to balance that part of it as well. But I think it'll be interesting. And then also I am bringing the bike again, and I won't be riding it in Zion, but I do plan to stop by Death Valley on the way back. And by then the weather should be normal and calm and sunny and nice, and do some bike riding there as kind of my little reward for sleeping in my car in sub-freezing temperatures for several days on end. So it'll be an interesting trip. I'll do videos, I'll do the written journal, but I don't know what to expect. And so we'll see. I'm a little scared by the weather. I got to admit, I'm not going to be traveling when it's going to be coming through, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. But also we're recording these a lot closer to when they actually come out. So yeah. After people listen to this, they'll know how things turned out with regard to the weather. But
yeah,
it'll be interesting.
No, that's got to be nice though to head into a location like that, especially with the weather being what it's predicted to be.
Yeah,
and not have to worry about, do I have to come away with anything here? Like,
yeah, because the combination of high wind and rain, that's not large format friendly.
No, not really.
It really isn't. That's like blow your camera over and then the whole thing gets like, a tree falls on you. So it's not the best for that. But we'll see. And the other thing too, like going into the Death Valley trip, I've learned just to trust in the process, and knowing that I will find stuff. There's always subjects to be found, even if the conditions aren't as you would hope them to be. Like if there's no snow, if there's no ice or whatever, I'll find something when I go to design. So that's also kind of a nice, at least a nice thought to have, just to trust in the process. And the same steps that have led to some of the past work that I'm very happy with are the same steps that will lead to whatever I end up with on this trip. But I don't know. Maybe just my low energy right now is a little bit of the first day funk before the actual trip. But I don't know.
Maybe
we'll see on that.
Get that out of the way before you head on
over
over there.
Out of my legs, and
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but yeah. So I don't know. We'll see on that. And also I've been working on the videos. I have 5 videos from the Death Valley series. So from a video standpoint, it's going pretty well too. If I get another 4 or 5 out of this, I think I'll be very busy all the way through the spring season ahead, just working on all the stuff associated with it.
Yeah, it's good. When do you normally post those videos by, or any timeline that you have for them?
It usually ends up being about a month.
Okay, right.
And so I think for me, the biggest thing is that I really want to take time, and this is something we've talked about in the past, but I really want to take time to get to know those images, and to give the images that I don't think much of, to give them a little more time to sit and separate that experience from, just seeing them on the screen and having that separation. But I'm pretty confident in the images that I have from that trip. So at least that part, I feel like I'm satisfied with enough with them to share them. And then it's just a matter of putting the videos together. But the videos will be a little faster this time because, as we had mentioned in the previous episode, for some of the stuff, I'm just going to read the journal entries and do that for the narration. And it actually works surprisingly well, in a way that it would seem as though I had put more planning into it rather than me just scribbling down stuff in the back of the truck and then, that actually being an effective voiceover. But I think that'll add another kind of a personal touch to the process as a whole.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that all comes together. I mean, I just finished watching your most recent videos. For some reason, I just took like a few week break. I needed a break from Ben.
That's a good thing.
Yeah,
I want one of those as well.
I mean, I figure I talk to you.
He keeps following me around in
every
spandex
week
and all the mirrors. Yeah,
I know. It's talking about spandex and puppies every week, and then just having to watch your videos, and you walk around in these beautiful places, and it's not good.
I know, right?
But I was watching the one, and I don't remember if it was. I think it was during your film reveal video, and there was a photograph that you had that I absolutely loved, but that you were uncertain of it because the light leak that you experienced.
Okay, yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, it was. What kind of tree was that? It was the tree trunk with these sweeping yellow leaves in front of it. And then,
it was the ash tree with some maples in the foreground, and it was a little flared up from some sunlight just out of view.
Yeah. Have you done anything with that photo though? Like in terms of Photoshop editing, not necessarily to get rid of the light leak, but I don't know, something about it, even with the light leak, with that imperfection, that's still one that I would consider playing around with, seeing how it prints and that kind of deal. At least in my view. I
haven't tried printing. I did scan it. And it looks okay. But I don't know. Maybe it's one of the ones where, given more time, I'll have a different perspective on it. I haven't even opened that file since probably like November or whatever, when I was working on the stuff last. But it does add another aspect, kind of this little sort of glowish sort of light. And who knows, maybe it's the sort of thing where I'll go back and I'll try to photograph that scene next year, only to realize it's missing something. What is it missing? Flare.
Light leak. Yeah, flare. There you go.
Yes. It just needs that extra little bit of flair to it. And then suddenly every single photo will have flare, and I'll use a mirror to reflect light into the lens.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
My secret. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
That's 2024 Ben.
Yeah, I'll put that in my upcoming tips and tricks video for landscape photography techniques you need to know.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what the pros do. Yeah,
bring back those crystal balls and everything that people used to love.
Yeah, I just realized I have not seen those for a while, and that's a good thing. Yeah. I was actually contacted by them, as was everyone else. Like, oh, do you want one of these? I'm like, I really don't.
Yeah.
I'll just carry it around outside and burn a hole in my hand.
True.
So,
yeah. Shave off the bottom of it and make it as a interesting looking paperweight until it burns all the paper underneath it.
Yes. That had to have been, when was that? That had to have been like, that was pre-pandemic.
That was a while ago.
I don't know, like 2017, 2018 or something, when we saw tons of those. But so at the end of the episodes, we've been doing artist suggestions, and it is my week this week. And so this is a friend of mine that some of you might already be following, some of you might not be following. His name is Mike Fink. He goes by Fink. His Instagram, he actually has two of them, and you'll see why in a moment here. One of them is Mike Fink, Fink photo. So Mike Fink photo. The other is Mike Fink art. So he's a large format photographer. That's how I met him, and because I've seen him in Zion many times through the years. He's always been a regular there. He's also a woodworker. He's also a graffiti artist, and really amazing eye when it comes to art. He has his own like private gallery. Just really fantastic photographs. He built his own camera a while back, builds his own frames for his photos, and has very, very creative graffiti artwork that's very difficult to describe. But if you check out his Mike Fink art Instagram, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Some really cool three-dimensional stuff, and just a very signature style. And back in 2017, when at the time I was using a camera by the company that's not around anymore, but they're called Ebony. It was this Japanese company, very high-end cameras, and that camera got smashed to the ground in Death Valley.
Right.
And he actually rebuilt that camera, which was amazing, and he did a really, really fantastic job with that. So highly recommend people check him out. He only recently joined Instagram from a photography standpoint, so he doesn't have a ton. He has like 200 something followers on there, and then his graffiti art account has more. But fantastic work. I always enjoy bumping into him in Zion, and very, very, very cool guy.
Yeah, I'm looking at his Mike Fink photo account, and some of these panoramas. I'm not usually a huge fan of panoramic photography, especially when it comes to verticals.
Verticals are tough, but man, they can really shine when they're done well.
Yeah, that first photo that he has on here is a vertical showing the fall colors in, I think it's in Zion. 6x17 back on 4x5, and yeah, that just works.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing about panoramas, is that you can give like this entirely different perspective on things, and it's not something that you immediately think of, especially for a vertical. It's something that you have to put a lot of intention into, and search for that specific composition that works well for it. And they're difficult to display, but in some cases, whether it's like a large house with like kind of a along the stairway or something like that, to really fill that space and get some good natural light on them. It can make for a really nice presentation. When I had a Fuji panoramic camera, and it was a fun camera to use, but verticals were always, I did a couple experimental ones, and they were surprisingly cool when you look at the end result, but I always had a really hard time visualizing, even though I had a viewfinder, I had a hard time visualizing what that image would look like as a print. So it definitely takes a very good eye to know that while you're in the field.
Yeah, he has another one here that he posted November 24th of 2022, titled Determined, and that's got a nice little plant on some stone wall or canyon wall with a bunch of weird looking like divots, or I don't even know how to describe them, but they each have little rocks in them. Just really visually interesting photograph. Another panorama. But yeah, definitely a good choice here.
Yeah. And definitely highly recommended. And he's got some fantastic work.
Yeah. Speaking on panoramics for a minute here too, I found this article. So with the GFX system, they allow you to do like, they have in-camera crops or aspect ratios that you can switch to. And they have a ton more than what most camera brands or whatever will allow. Like a lot of cameras will just do like 1:1 or the traditional like 2:3 or any of that stuff. But most don't do 4:5, which has always been my issue because
that's the one I want the most.
Exactly. Yeah. And Sony never really implemented it. I don't even think for their most recent
4:3, which is kind of like, it's in the ballpark, but it's not quite. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the Fujis, they have a ton of options, and among 4x5, and they also have 65 to 24, which is a very interesting panoramic format. It goes back to the original Fujifilm TX1 or X-Pan, whichever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which, for those that don't know, it was essentially a 35 millimeter panoramic camera that exposed two 35 millimeter frames at once, making the area captured on film 65 millimeters by 24 millimeters, hence the aspect ratio. And found this article online thanks to someone on the Landscape Photographers Worldwide Discord. And the photographs that they've shared on here are making me want to try it out. And like I said, I'm not one for panoramic format. It's just not something that I've ever really been able to see very well. In that sense, I find that even traditional 2 to 3, 4 to 6, whatever, is too wide, and especially with verticals, it's too skinny.
Yeah.
But I figure, why not? It's digital, so just play around with it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And it's nice being able to see that through the viewfinder, see that crop, and through the live view, the LCD on the back. Then if I don't like it when I get back to the computer at home, it's not like it's baked into the raw file. So
yeah, and it makes sense that Fuji is the one to implement that, and because that's an area where, you know, the film background really does translate to a better experience, and having that history of, because Fuji's been one to make some very unique and kind of experimental cameras through the years. They've always been that oddball camera maker, all kinds of folding cameras and this and that. And so it makes sense that those are in there. And one of the biggest things when it comes to working with those aspect ratios is simply to be able to put a rectangle around the scene to experiment with it, which has been something that has been traditionally quite difficult. So it's really great that those are built into it. So yeah, that's really neat. That's something to look forward to at some point when I'm, dragged kicking and screaming into the world of empty ones and zeros.
It won't be that bad. I'm telling you, this system, it's definitely the one to go for if you're coming away from film towards digital. But
yeah,
one other thing before we wrap all of this up, that since we're on the topic of Fuji, and it's on my mind since I just thought it was an absolutely hilarious review. The X100 VI came out for pre-orders and everything a couple weeks ago. And personally, I used the X100V I rented it for a cousin's birthday party, and I loved using it. It was a great little camera. But when I went to look for a compact camera, I ended up with, obviously, as we've talked in the past, with a Ricoh, because the Fuji was just astronomically priced, and on the used market, it was fetching far too much than what I was willing to pay for it.
And also the Ricoh is smaller too, which is an added bonus.
Exactly. Yeah. Some downsides to it, but on the whole, still happy with it. But so I was looking just for the fun of it on Fred Miranda with this new Fuji. Not that I plan on getting one, but I was just curious if anyone was trying to resell it already. And I found two so far. I found two postings. One was for $2,100. Mind you, this camera retails for about $1,600, I think it is.
Yeah.
So $2,100. It's unopened. The person selling it has not even received it yet. It comes with a receipt with their personal information, of course, crossed off. And they're like, yeah, I'm not quite sure if I want to keep it or not. Haven't received it yet, but wanted to see if anybody wanted to buy it for $500 markup. And then it gets better, because I found another one on there for $2,400 that the person placed two pre-orders, and I quote, to make sure that I would at least get one for myself. all of this to go into the review that I found, and I think I found this because of Jeffrey Sidoris's podcast. I think they were the ones that mentioned it. But there's a review of this camera on the Photographer that I'll just read the first paragraph to it and have a link in the show notes. But it says, for the past few days, I've been testing a fashion accessory, the Fujifilm X100 VI. I'd like to otherwise call it the best toy camera of 2024. To be frank, the deepest emotions within me want to label this camera as the embodiment of the word meh. At least, that's the best way that I can describe the one that I'm using. But there's also another way to say it. The end of a 13-year-long honeymoon. Sometimes, the best thing a photographer can do is finally give up on those who continue to quit on us. And I truly feel that's what Fujifilm is doing here. When I say that the Fujifilm X100 VI feels like a betrayal to the TikTok hype machine, I'm very honest. Don't believe the influencers.
Huh.
And it goes on, and it is scathing.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, you're talking about a camera that was released, the same body with like one or two cosmetic or aesthetic changes, with just same lens with a 40 megapixel sensor for $200 or $300 more. And this is the best that they could do after, how long has the X100V been out? Like 5 years, whatever it's been.
I know it's been a long time.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that they would have been really ramping this up, like changing a bunch of things, like, but I don't know. I mean, it's a money-making machine, so I guess they figure why not just get in on the major resale market that there was and see if they can't make some of that money. But yeah, I don't know. But there's that. There's our episode for the day, and yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully I will have some good stories to tell when I return for the next one. And yeah, there we go.
All right, we'll wrap it up.
I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. And you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.